Thousands were expected to pass through the doors of the Oxygen Gardens in the coming week, and thousands had indeed already arrived, making the journey to Saturn from all across the solar system. As Alice crossed the gardens towards the professor, she was carelessly knocked sideways by a colleague who was too focused on scribbling into a notebook to see where he was going. "Excuse me," said the botanist, seconds after he had passed her. Alice straightened her lab coat and her glasses, took a deep breath, and carried on until she reached the professor. Professor Wilberforce," she said sheepishly. "I was wondering if I could have a word." Professor Wilberforce turned to her, and for a moment said nothing, simply staring at her with no trace of emotion. "That would be agreeable," he said eventually. "You seem somewhat perturbed. Is something the matter?" Alice nodded, nervously straightening her glasses once more. Yes," she said awkwardly. "I've been monitoring the atmospheric readings, and I've noticed that,
Spit it out, girl," snapped Wilberforce. "I haven't got all day."
"Well, I'm getting a high reading of ammonia." Wilberforce nodded thoughtfully, tapping the end of his pen against his teeth.
"Ammonia, you say?"
Alice nodded, her chin in her chest.
"Well, that's interesting," the professor continued. "Very interesting indeed. Follow me to my office. I'm sure there's a perfectly rational explanation for all this."
"Of course," said Alice, following the professor as he left the main chamber of the gardens and walked down the narrow corridor towards his office. Entering the professor's office was like stepping into another era. The walls were decorated with wooden panels on which the professor's many certificates and qualifications hung in frames. One wall of the room was occupied exclusively with bookshelves crammed from end to end with leather-bound volumes. His mahogany desk was huge and furnished with a large antique globe and a Tiffany dragonfly lamp. In one dimly lit corner of the office, under a glass dome, he kept a smaller specimen of Caeruliflora saturnalis, an almost bonsai-scaled replica of the giant in the main chamber. As Alice neared the centre of the room, Professor Wilberforce closed the door behind her.
"Now, Alice,"
he said, his tone suddenly warmer, more genial. "Why do you think there might be a noticeable trace of ammonia in the main chamber?" "Well," she stuttered, I don't know. The environment here is controlled 100%. There shouldn't be any traces of ammonia in there, unless the plants are producing it, but we've
already tested for that."
"Well, yes. So the only thing I can, think is that
Somebody is leaking ammonia into the chamber?"
Yes." Professor Wilberforce clapped his hands together just once, beaming at Alice, as if she was suddenly his star pupil. She'd never seen him behave this way before. It left her feeling strangely uncomfortable.
"Quite right," said Wilberforce. "Quite right. A trace of ammonia is being fed into the chamber. Fed, Alice, not leaked."
He walked across the office to the glass dome containing the smaller plant.
"They really are a miracle, aren't they?"
Alice nodded with what she hoped looked like enthusiasm, though she still felt uneasy.
"All this," said the professor, "this sudden fruition, this glorious outburst of life, and all from the tiniest of spores."
Yes," said Alice.
"How many years must the spores have been waiting there, Alice, do you think? Centuries? Millennia, perhaps? Who can say? All those years, those tiny, almost microscopic spores floated in the turbulence of the planet's atmosphere, still alive, but without the right environment to thrive. How do you think they survived, Alice?"
Alice looked from Professor Wilberforce to the plant and back again, shrugging.
"They were alive the whole time," said Wilberforce. "Living, breathing organisms, floating in clouds of hydrogen,